So our 4.5 notes, our whole goal here is to solve quadratic equations, and we have 3 different ways to do it. We have 2 more ways after this, okay? So the first way that we did on Friday was by graphing. So we practiced graphing, if you recall, to graph in vertex form, we first find the vertex. So for 1, it opens down, it is not stretched or compressed, so we can just sing that song in our heads and make the parabola. And then notice the solutions are where the graph hits the x-axis. So my solution, my 2 solutions here would be 3 and 5. So we solved by graphing. Graphing calculators also come in handy for this kind of thing if you're in need of going quickly, because things like the ACT require you to do questions really quickly. That can be helpful for you. Then we did, we actually didn't get to this part yet, so we'll start on page 2 with quadratics with b equal to 0, meaning there's no middle term, right? So in order to solve quadratics with b equal to 0, isolate the x squared term and then take the square root. Square root of each side. Of course, question 1 is almost done for us. It's already solved for the x squared. All we have to do is take the square root of both sides. So x equals 3, and also keep in mind that negative 3 would work, because negative 3 squared is also positive 9. So we have 3 and negative 3 as our solutions. On number 2, we would have to subtract the 1 first, and then take the square root of both sides. So in this case, x equals 4 and negative 4, and we actually have a quick way to write that. You can use this symbol here, which is plus or minus. It's a plus sign with a minus sign right underneath it. So that symbol right there is plus or minus. Number 3, divide both sides by 3. So x squared equals 64. Yeah. Square root both sides here. X equals plus or minus 8. Number 4 is a 2-step. We subtract the 4 from both sides, but we have negative x squared equals negative 36. So in this question, we'd have to divide both sides by negative 1. So when x squared equals 36, we can take the square root of both sides. X equals plus or minus 6. Number 3, add 3 to both sides. So negative x squared equals negative 7. Divide both sides by negative 1. So x squared equals 7. It's not a perfect square, so we can write our answer as x equals plus or minus square root of 7. Or we could round it to 3 decimal places. On your calculator, if you press second and then x squared, that's the square root symbol. So type in the square root of 7. And then round to the nearest thousandth.
What is it?
7 squared, it's above the x squared. So second and then x squared gives you the square root button. What do we get for the square root of 7 to 3 decimal places? Luke. 2 point, is that what you got?
Yeah.
6, 4, 6. But don't forget the plus or minus in front. Either one of these answers would be correct depending on the way the question is worded and how they would like you to answer that question. Number 6, subtract 25 from both sides. So x squared equals 0. Of course, when we square root 0, we just get 0. There's only one solution. Remember, on the front, we talked about the options for the number of solutions, 0, 1, or 2. This is a case where there would just be one solution. So this would hit the x-axis, or hit the y-axis at 0. What did I say? So the value would be 0, 25. That's where the y-intercept would happen. Alright, so that's solving quadratics when b equals 0. The next one is solving quadratics by factoring. So this is a big one, and this ties right into lesson 4.4. And this is when the x term does exist, or that middle term does exist. In other words, the b does not equal 0. So you can't get x squared by itself. That doesn't work anymore. So here's one of 3 other methods. We're going to also talk about the quadratic formula and completing the square, but this one is factoring. So you have to apply the zero product property, or the zero property for short, which just says, hey, anything times 0 is 0. You know that. We use the property to solve equations that are in standard form. So that's a requirement. It has to be in standard form. To solve equations in factored form, be sure the equation is set equal to 0. So you'll first replace the y, or the f of x, with a 0. So these are your steps. I know when I get tripped up on how to proceed with a math question, sometimes helps to just refer back to the steps and go step by step through that problem. So put the equation in standard form. Factor if possible. And then set each factor equal to 0. And then solve each equation. So for these first few examples, they're already factored for us, so we can just get a feel for what it means to solve once it's factored. Since we already know how to factor, this starts us at step 4. So we'll set each one of these equal to 0. So either x plus 1 equals 0, and x minus 2 equals 0. Set them both equal to 0, and then solve each one. So the first one we saw, we subtract 1 from both sides, so x equals negative 1. Sorry. We solve this one by adding 2 to both sides, so x equals 2. So those would be your 2 x-intercepts. For number 2, again, it's already factored for us. We just have to set each factor equal to 0. So we have 2x minus 1 equals 0, and x minus 3 equals 0. Add 1 to both sides. So 2x equals 1. Did not leave enough room, I apologize. Divide both of these by 2. So we have, I'm going to take it over here. So 2x equals 1. Divide both sides by 2. Right, it's just x equals 1/2. And then over here, add 3 to both sides. So we just get x equals 3. Most often, as you can tell, you have 2 solutions. Number 3, set each one equal to 0. Add 6 to both sides, we get x equals 6. Add 2 to both sides, we get x equals 2. Number 4. People get tripped up sometimes when there's just that monomial out front. Hey, it equals 0. That'd be one of your solutions. 0 times anything is 0. Set the 3x minus 1 equal to 0. Add the 1 to both sides. And then divide both sides by 3. So x equals 1/3. Two solutions, x equals 0 and x equals 1/3. Flip it over. Now we have to practice factoring. These are level 1 questions, so they should go pretty quickly. Most of them are level 1. I think there's 2 level 2s on here. 6 is on the left, that's just your C. 5 is on the right, that's your B. So 2 times 3, 2 plus 3 equals 5. Now we just go straight to factored form. But don't forget, we're going to have to set it equal to 0. So x plus 2, x plus 3. Sometimes you can just look at it, and what plus 2 is 0? If that works for you, do it that way. If not, make your 2 equations. X plus 2 equals 0. X plus 3 equals 0. Subtract the 2 from both sides. So this side gives us x equals negative 2. And then the next one is x equals negative 3, right? I'm running out of space again. Number 6. Again, level 1, so we just put the C here and the B over here on the right side of the chart. So 3 times negative 1 is 2. Factored form. X plus 3 and x minus 1. You could set up your 2 equations and solve. This is the kind of stuff I might do on scrap paper or off to the side. This step right here where you make the 2 equations. Subtract the 3 from both sides, so this one will give you negative 3. Add the 1, this one will give you 1. Just give me a thumbs up if you're able to kind of see those without doing that step, so I know if I should keep doing that step. Okay, cool. Number 7 is not in standard form, so we actually have to start with that first step in this one. So we should subtract the 3x and the 10 from both sides. Subtract the 3x and the 10 from both sides. So step 1 said you have to have it set equal to 0. So these now cancel out. So this side is equal to 0. And the left side, x squared minus 3x minus 10 is now in standard form. So we have our chart, negative 10 here, negative 3 here. So we have a negative 5 and a 2 that multiply to get negative 10 and add to get negative 3. So that factors out x minus 5, x plus 2, and then it's just the opposite, right? So it's going to be, our solutions would be a positive 5 and a negative 2. So remember, this is a common question on the Math Excel assignment that I've already gotten. Number 7, remember that the equations must be in standard form in order to factor. Okay? So if you come across an equation where it just doesn't already equal 0 for you, make sure you get it into standard form first, and then you can move forward. Number 8, it's a binomial. Again, this is probably another one of the most common questions. Factor out a common factor. In this case, the common factor is x. So we factor out the x. And then solve. Again, there's that monomial out front. So that's x equals 0. And then we have to solve for 3x plus 4 equals 0. Subtract the 4 from both sides, so 3x equals negative 4. Divide by 3. X equals negative 4/3. Number 9, we could obviously do that as the process for b equals 0. There's no middle term there, but I want to refresh your memories on difference of perfect squares. So whenever we have a perfect square minus a perfect square, it fits this special form for factoring. We did that in our 4.3 notes. So to factor this, we think about what's the square root of x squared? It's just x. What's the square root of 4? It's 2. So we write that as x plus 2, x minus 2 equal to 0. Now, of course, if you were given this question and it wasn't in a particular set of instructions that said solve by factoring, you might just add the 4 to both sides and square root. Totally fine. So in this question then, if we solve each one for 0, x would be negative 2 and positive 2, or we could just write plus or minus 2. Binomial again. So you've got these two categories for binomials, right? One where there is an x term where you just need to factor out a common factor, and one where there isn't an x term or middle term, and you can solve by difference of perfect squares or the method that we just did. So in this case, we have both. We have a common factor and then we also have the difference of perfect squares. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 100 is 10. So then we solve. The 2 out front actually doesn't change where this will hit the x-axis. It only changes that we'll have a stretch involved in the shape. So this is going to be negative 10, positive 10, or plus or minus 10. Last one in this section looks like a level 3. So we make our t-chart. A times c goes on the left, just like in our opener. 12 is what we get when we multiply 2 and 6. 5 goes on the right. That's our b value. Look for factors of 12 that add up to get 5. So we can try out 1 and 12. That's 13. 2 and 6. That's 8. 3 and 4. That's 7. Nothing works. So that means this is not factorable. Doesn't mean we can't solve it. We can solve it, just not using the factoring method. So we can't really proceed since this is in the factor section. So we just write not factorable. You won't have any like that on your assignment tonight. This is just to remind you that this method only works if the expression can be factored. Sometimes it can't. If it can be factored, this is the easiest way. If it can't be factored, then there's 2 other methods. So 14, I'm going to do that go back to the method. You can use any method in this section. So let's just use our b equals 0 method. Square root both sides, so x equals plus or minus 4. $15. Okay, this is just like number 7. We need to get it equal to 0. We need to subtract 7 from both sides. So we have x squared minus 6x minus 7 equals 0. And now we've got the t-chart, -7 and -6. -7 and 1, good. So we factor that, x minus 7, x plus 1. So x equals 7 or -1 and -1. $16 is the only one on this page that actually is factorable, and we with a level 3 method. So -15 here, -14 here. They did make it easy on us at least. So the -15 times 1 gives us a -14. So we split the middle. Hopefully you did this well on the quiz just now, so it should be getting easier every time you practice it. Common factor in this first group would be 3x. X minus 5. 1 is the only common factor in that second group, so we can put 1 out front. X minus 5. So then we have x minus 5, 3x plus 1. The x minus 5 probably gives an obvious solution for you of 5, right? And then the 3x plus 1, we may need to write that equation. Yes. Subtract the 1 from both sides, so we get 3x equals -1. Divide both sides by 3. So x equals -1/3. So -1/3, and so we'll just x equals -1/3 and 5. Last one, common factor. Right, especially if there's a plus sign between the two, it's definitely just looking for a common factor there. So the 2x is the common factor, leaving us with x plus 4. I forgot to write equals 0 on that last one. So 2x equals 0 and x plus 4 equals 0. Giving us the two solutions of 0 and -4. You have a few minutes left to get started.